Hey everybody, Chris here again. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the Retro Computing Lab here in the basement. Isn't it beautiful? I love it. Anyway, so the focus of today's video is going to be networking and printing in LANtastic. You might recall from last week's video that we had a look at a day in the life on the Tandy 1000 HX and did a printout in Print Shop. So this week, I'm going to show you how I did it. However, before I get into that, I want to say this. There were actually several failed attempts at getting that to work. One thing I tried was using MTCP and printing directly to port 9100. That didn't work. Had lots of cases where the document wouldn't finish printing. I also tried using Microsoft LAN Manager, but unfortunately that took up too much memory and I couldn't actually run Wordperfect or any other programs I wanted to run when it was running. So my third attempt was actually using LANtastic. So for LANtastic Client, we're using version 6, and for LANtastic Server, we're using version 7. We're going to go through the setup process for that today, and I'll show you how I configured my Pentium 2 system to be the server and the Tandy 1000 HX to be the client. The next thing we're going to do is set up our LANtastic server. And for this particular server, I have chosen to use my Pentium 2 machine. I figured that my Pentium 2 machine running Windows 98 would make for the perfect server. Now, since our objective here is to share a printer, the first thing that we need to do, since we're dealing with a JetDirect compatible laser printer, is install the ability to have JetDirect TCP/IP ports for use with a printer in Windows 98. And the way we're going to facilitate that is by installing the HP standard port monitor for Windows 98. So we'll go ahead and click through that. Welcome, welcome. Click Next. Agree to the license agreement. We're going to be installing the HP standard TCP/IP port monitor. We don't need IPX SPX because we are dealing with a TCP/IP network. Click Next. All right, that's going to be all installed. So now what we can do is set up a printer that we will later share once we install LANtastic. So to do that, I'm going to go to Start, Settings, and Printers, and add a printer. We'll click Next. We're going to choose a local port, despite this being a network printer, because what we can actually do is now that we've installed that HP standard port monitor, is we can choose a JetDirect port directly. So let's scroll down. This happens to be a Samsung laser printer, but it's PCL compatible. So we can go with something like an HP LaserJet 4. That would be fine. Click Next. Now we get to configure our ports. And actually, I don't know if it allows us to do this at this point. So for the time being, we'll just say LPT1. And then finally, Next. And we will finish. We're not going to print a test page because it won't work. Now that we have our printer, we can come in here and go to Properties and go to Details. And we can change our ports. We'll go ahead and add a port. And we want to choose an other port of an HP standard TCP/IP port. And we'll go through the wizard here, and the address happens to be 192.168.1.26, so we'll select that, and then Next. Now it's trying to communicate with that printer, I believe, but it says, hey, I don't know what this is. We'll just say Standard JetDirect and click Next. And then from there, we should be all configured. We'll click Finish. Great. Now with this, we should be able to print a test page, and we'll be in business. Let's see, where is that? General, I think. Yes, print test page. Oh, it's reminding you, make sure you apply the settings first. Now we can print a test page. And then from there, it should print out on that laser printer. So the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and actually, and you can hear the printer in the background perhaps, now it's printing, so that's good. The next thing we want to do is actually install LANtastic. So I've gone ahead and copied LANtastic 7 to this PC. We're going to go to the LANtastic 7 directory and the disks. And I've actually extracted all the contents of the disks into these individual folders. We want to run the setup program. Don't run setup 32. It won't work. I think the setup program swaps between the different setups and determines which ones to run. If you go to run this, it'll fail and say it can't find a configuration file. So we'll run setup. All right, installing LANtastic, we'll click next. We agree with the license agreement. And now we need to put in the serial number and verification key. Okay, I have put in my serial number verification key and clicked next. Computer name of P2, that's fine. And we do want to share this computer's devices and printers, which means installing LANtastic server. So we'll click next. We don't want to share a modem on this computer. We do have Ethernet. We'll click next. And we do not need the internet gateway, but that's a really cool capability, but we don't need that, so we'll click next. And we are also not going to be deploying to other LANtastic PCs, if you will, so we'll just click next as well there to not install the install services. So there's all of our settings. We can click finish. And from there, Windows is going to build itself a driver information database and install LANtastic. Oh yes, so during the installation process, this is a known Windows 98 issue. You end up with this particular problem where it can't find this file. You just point this to c:\windows\system and hope for the best. It'll complain again, skip file. And again. And again. And again. And during one of these prompts, if you point it to the right place, you'll be okay. So let's just go ahead. Let's go ahead and browse and go to Windows System, and it should be there. There we go. If you hit skip enough times or point the file, eventually it'll be happy and it'll work fine. That's a known issue. It's documented in the Windows 98 errata. So try a combination of pointing it there and you'll be just fine. All right, installation complete. Remove any diskettes and hit the restart key. You'll notice how it was very nicely able to find all of the installation files by just putting the disks on the hard disk there. I find that a lot easier than putting 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 floppies into the drive. That can get a little bit annoying. All right, back into the GUI interface. Rebuilding that driver information database. All right, and we're started up. We'll go ahead and close that disk 1 folder there. And we have a new icon on the desktop, LANtastic. And one other thing I want to show you is if we go into Network Neighborhood and right-click, you can see now we have Client for LANtastic as well as a NetBIOS for LANtastic and File and Print Sharing for LANtastic. So all that's been added. If we click on the LANtastic icon here on the desktop, first thing it's going to do is ask us if we want to share our resources like devices and printers, or drives and printers. So if we click yes, that will now automatically make all of our drives and printers accessible on the LANtastic network, including our CD-ROM drive, and I think our floppy drive. And it's going to ask us to register, which we won't do at this point. I'm not sure if that would even work. Okay, it'll remind us in a few weeks. And now from there, we're all set up. We've got our different print jobs that we can look at from our different print queues. And this LANtastic server, as long as we leave this PC up and running just like this, can do whatever we need to service LANtastic requests. Okay, so with the server complete, our next step is to head over to the Tandy and install the client. However, LANtastic actually comes on 1.44 megabyte high density floppies, and that presents a challenge since the Tandy has a 720K drive. So I actually had to get a little bit creative, and to start out, I used a virtual machine to get things set up. So let me show you how I did that. To configure LANtastic 6 for DOS on the virtual machine, we're basically going to do 2 things. 1, we're going to install LANtastic 6 and configure it for use with the NDIS drivers for my card, which happens to be a Xircom Pocket Etherlink 3. And second, we're going to configure the NDIS drivers to also provide packet driver support for purposes of other applications which we want to run. So first, what I've done is I've set up this little virtual machine. I think we've used this in past videos. It's a small machine with 32 megs of memory and a 50 megabyte image. And what we're going to do is inject a couple of files into that image for usage. So let me go ahead and open up that image. And I've actually created a drivers directory here that I want to inject in. And in this directory, we have a couple of things. One, we have the series of drivers for my Zircom Pocket Etherlink 3. And we also have this quote-unquote shim driver, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes, as well as a protocol file to accompany it. And we'll get into those two files here in a few minutes, but for now, I'm just going to inject them into the image so that we only have to inject files into the image once. So to do that, we go Image, Inject a Folder, and we can navigate to our desktop, and we should have the LT6 folder and the drivers. We can hit OK, say yes, and those files have been injected into the image. We can now close WinImage, and we can power up our machine. Now, in powering up our machine, I'm going to hold down the Shift key so that we can bypass loading config sys and autoexec.bat, since we had whatever we had last time, and I don't want to load that. And I'm actually now going to delete config sys and autoexec.bat so that we have a nice clean slate for purpose of installing LANtastic. All right, so now let's make a directory so that we can extract our Zircom Pocket Etherlink drivers. If we go to the Zircom directory where I just moved those drivers and type pe3 drive, a self-extracting ARG file will execute. It will ask us for every directory it wishes to create, which is fine. I'm sure there's a way around this. Here you can see it actually just extracted the NDIS drivers, which is exactly what we're going to need for this exercise. So perfect. We're all set there. I'm going to leave the shim drivers alone for now. We'll talk more about those in a few minutes. All right. So with that set up, we can now go ahead and install LANtastic. So what I'm going to do is into the floppy drive, inject the first image for the LANtastic installer. And then we can go ahead and run install. It's going to say that Microsoft Windows was not found, and if you press enter, it will run under DOS, which is fine. We're first created with this introductory and congratulatory screen for installing LANtastic. We will press the any key. And then it's going to tell us about more details about the installation process, ensuring that we also reboot when complete. We will press the any key again. We're going to set up the computer name of Tandy, since we will ultimately be copying this installation to the Tandy. And drive C is where we want to install the LANtastic application into the LANtastic directory. And we also are going to set up some other options like sharing. We do not actually want to share drives and printers, namely because we want to conserve as much memory as possible on the Tandy. And likewise, we will also not be setting up any of these auxiliary options here in the interest of conserving memory. All right, so we're now okay to continue with the installation. And we now need to choose support for NDIS. Since our driver is not listed here, we will choose the NDIS support for network adapters. We will tell it that the NDIS directory is at the C:\Zircom location. We also do not want to set up any drive or printer connections, so we will press enter there. And now we can see our configuration all set to go, and that our network adapter has been detected, per the drivers, that is. Our network drivers have been detected, so we can now proceed to perform the installation. All right, it's also saying that it's going to create this startnet.bat, and it will also modify any existing files, but we do not have an existing autoexec.bat or config sys, so we have nothing to worry about. We will press the any key. From there, LANtastic will install, and now it's asking for disk 2, so we can go ahead and swap over to put disk 2 into the virtual drive, and we can proceed with the installation. Okay, autoexec.bat has been created, and config sys has been created or will be created. All right, now we're all set. It's saying go ahead and pop the disk out of the drive, so we can go in and do that. Go to devices, and we will remove it, and we will press the any key, and the computer will now restart. All right. What we're going to have here is catastrophic failure, since we do not have a Zircon Pocket Etherlink adapter in our virtual machine, but that's perfectly fine. All right. So with that part of the installation complete, we can go look at config.sys and see that we now have a couple of lines here, one related to using Protocol Manager, one related to using our NDIS driver, and a couple of lines for setting files and buffers. If we look at autoexec.bat, we can see that there's one line for calling the startnet.bat program under LANtastic. So we're all set there. So the next thing that we want to do is to configure the network driver shim. If we go to this website here that we can see this nice individual has put together, we'll see that there are a variety of options for ending up with the protocol that you care about in DOS and how to get there. There's IPX, Packet, NDIS, and ODI. Since we're concerned about Packet, I'm going to go ahead and click here. What this is going to allow me to do is to run applications like MTCP or Arachne or other DOS applications that require packet drivers without having to reboot the system and load a packet driver. So this is completely optional, but kind of cool to do. As we come down into this section, we can see there are two files that we can download. There's this DiskPacket9 and DiskPacket11. I went ahead and downloaded both of them because the DiskPacket9, albeit older, also has instructions on how to actually use the packet driver to NDIS to packet driver converter, I should say. Let's go have a look at that. If we come over here, we can see under the DiskPacket9 directory, we have a README file. And if we look at that file, it's going to tell us the different options on how to go ahead and configure the system. If we scroll down here, we can see that basically we would set up this packet drive section, and we would also set up a binding that would match whatever the name of our network card binding is. We'd also set up an interrupt vector, a daisy chain vector, which apparently is not used at this point. I went ahead and set it up anyway, and whether or not we're using Novell Network, which in our case we won't be. So skip ahead, and if we actually go back here and look at that protocol.ini file that we copied on disk earlier, you can see that I've got it all configured for use with our particular Ethernet card, which happens to have the NDIS name of PE3 NDIS _NIF, as you can see in the block above. So with that, we're all set, and I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this protocol file into the LANtastic directory and overwrite the existing one that's there. So now all of the settings will be set for using the driver. The other thing we're going to do is actually move the packet driver to the LANtastic directory. And the other thing we need to do is actually reference it in config.sys so that it gets called on startup. So we go to config.sys, and we can put in a setting here. It needs to be after the NDIS driver is loaded. I think it was diskpacket.dos. So from there, now we're all set to go. Let's just confirm that I got the name right. And indeed, it is diskpkt.dos. All right. So with this, we're actually ready to take this full installation and copy it over to the Tandy. I'm going to go ahead and close the virtual machine. And we're going to load up our trusty WinImage once again. And crack open this particular image for this virtual machine. And we're going to copy some directories out. So I'll come back over to my LANtastic 6 directory I had on my desktop, make a new folder called Done, and let's go ahead and grab some files. First of all, let's grab config.sys. Let's also grab autoexec.bat, and let's grab the entirety of the LANtastic directory. And with those things grabbed, we should be all set, because once again, within this LANtastic directory, we already copied our diskpacket.dos, as well as our updated protocol.ini file, which has the packet driver in it. And if we were to go look at config.sys, we would see that that packet driver is now being loaded in config.sys. So with this, we're all ready to take this done directory and copy it over to the Tandy. So what I've gone ahead and done here is actually copied the LANtastic directory over to the Tandy. And I've actually already made the modifications to config.sys and autoexec.bat, but let's go ahead and go over them. It just so happens that on the Tandy I have a DOS multi-boot configuration, so I just went ahead and blended in the config sys and auto-exec bat settings that we saw a minute ago into the configuration here. So you can see we've added this menu item for LANtastic, DOS with LANtastic and packet driver shim. And then down here, I went ahead and added the protman line that we saw earlier, as well as the ndis line and this packet line that we added by hand. Remember that this line here is our packet driver shim. And then for autoexec.bat, as we saw over on the virtual machine, it's really just one line to call this startnet.bat. So I added a LANtastic label to autoexec.bat, I called it startnet.bat, and then on and to the rest. So those are the changes for autoexec.bat. Let's go ahead and exit out here. And let's reboot the Tandy, and we can load that configuration. So item 4 on the list, DOS with LANtastic and packet driver shim. And of course our LANtastic server is already up and running, so we're good to go there. Put in our current date and time. Now we can see our LANtastic configuration kick off. Oh, up here, you could see where the ndis driver loaded, as well as the ndis to packet driver shim. I guess it was made by Utah State University in 1991 by Mr. Dan Lysiami. So that's all loaded here. And here now we can see LANtastic loading with the AI LAN bio, AI ndis, and the redirector, the 3 things that load for LANtastic. Isn't that cool how Tandy 1000s have a hold button so you can actually pause what's happening? So there's all the LANtastic loaded. Now we're loaded into MenuWorks. So a cool thing about LANtastic actually is, even for DOS, there's a really nice program called Net, which allows you to map things, such as drives and printers. So we can go into here, and we can connect to another computer's printer, and you can actually see I've already connected a couple of them. We can go ahead and connect this one again. I have this particular printer on the Pentium 2 LANtastic server connected to 2 LPT ports because some DOS programs don't have an LPT3. And when I started out, I configured some that way, and then I have others that I configured with LPT1. So we can go into LPT4 actually and press enter. We can see our option to connect to a computer, and there's our option to have a printer, so we can hit OK, and now we are connected there. That easy. They really did a good job of making it simple. Since I don't want that to persist, I'm going to go ahead and delete it. All right. So that's all fine and great. We can set up our connections, and you can see I have a couple that are persistent. Of course, the next time that we reboot the PC, if we don't make them persistent, we're going to lose them. And the way that we can fix that is by running the net show/batch command and piping it to connect.bat. So let's do that. And now we have a connect.bat, which will have all of our settings. So just to kind of show you what that looks like on the screen here, you can see that basically all of our LANtastic connection settings are going to be put into place of our current environment settings. So enabling a beep, a pop, speak. I guess that's kind of some other features in LANtastic. And then down here at the bottom, you can see where it's prompting us for a password to log in and logging into LPT1 and LPT3. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't need all those settings. Just go ahead and cut those out. And now we can save our batch file, and we can pop out of here. So that's how you can set up some persistent connections. And if we were to go look into the LANtastic startnet.bat, you can see where the connect.bat actually gets called. So scroll down here a little bit. There you can see it. And actually what's really nice is they actually give you the directions on how to build connect.bat as a REM statement in the file as well, in case you ever need to know how to do it. So there you have it. So with that set, really the only thing left to do is to do some printing. And, well, actually one other thing. Let me just show you what the net show command looks like without batch, just so you can see it. So there's all of your different options there. So it talks about, as it had set the defaults, unsolicited messages that you receive are going to beep, pop up, and speak, which is kind of cool. And all of the other settings that we had as well. Auto login is enabled, and it shows us that we are logged in with our printers mapped. So with that, we can just go into Wordperfect. All right, we can do a little test here. Shift F7 and 1. So LaserJet 4, which I have configured on LPT3. And before too long, we should have some magic here over on our laser printer. So you can see the lights blinking there. Printer's firing up. And there we have our printout with test in Times New Roman. So there you have it. All right, well, that's pretty much what I had for you today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely subscribe to the channel. There's more content to come. And ring that notification bell. That way you'll know about new videos coming. If you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If not, give it a thumbs down. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.